Don't forget to like and subscribe this channel. Parker Crane was born on May 19, 1920, in Hollister, California, the son of Michelle Crane and an unknown father. It was his father who gave him the name Parker, a boy's name, which Michelle resented for reasons beyond understanding. From the very start, Michelle was an unstable and abusive mother, and by the time Parker was 7, his father had completely vanished from the picture. Whether he met a grim fate at Michelle's hands or simply fled in fear of her madness, one thing was certain: Parker was left alone to endure his mother's relentless cruelty. After relocating to Los Angeles, Michelle imposed her twisted vision onto Parker's life, transforming his room into a frilly, suffocating space filled with dolls, flowery wallpaper, and a disturbing number of wooden horses. She forced him to wear dresses, adorn a wig, and answer only to the name Marilyn, erasing any trace of the boy he truly was. The psychological torment escalated when Parker, in a fleeting act of defiance, signed his name on a drawing as Parker. Michelle's reaction was instant and violent. She lashed out, striking him hard before launching into a venomous tirade. "That is not your name, Parker. It's not your name. That is the name your father gave you. Your name is Marilyn." Her fury knew no bounds, and she made it clear. Resistance was futile. She didn't just strip Parker of his identity. She molded him into a vessel for her own hatred. Under her control, he was coerced into committing unspeakable acts against others, not out of his own malice, but as an extension of Michelle's twisted vendetta against the world. Whether Michelle continued her abuse into Parker's later years or not, the psychological scars she left behind never faded. The compulsions, the cross-dressing, and the violent tendencies followed him well into adulthood. When he finally inherited the family home, it became more than just a place to live. It became his hunting ground. It was there that he fully embraced his role as a serial killer, operating in the shadows, fueled by the trauma inflicted upon him decades before. But Parker's tragic past didn't just define his life. It followed him into the afterlife. And to understand just how deep his darkness runs, stay with us until the end of this video. Metal music. Welcome to horror history. The Bride in Black started as a minor character in the first Insidious film, yet his eerie presence unsettled audiences so much that he was expanded into one of the franchise's most disturbing figures. Over time, he evolved into the ultimate adversary of Elise Rainier, the gifted medium who dared to confront him. From the very beginning, the decision to have the bride portrayed as a man was intentional. Originally played by Philip Friedman in Insidious, the role was later taken over by Tom Fitzpatrick in Insidious, Chapter 2 and 3. The filmmakers explained their creative choice in the Blu-ray extras. Lee Hwanel. The old woman in the film is actually played by a man, which James thought would be a macabre touch. Eleanor Sabaduquia. When people asked him why, he simply said, "It's just creepy. It's disturbing because something feels off." With Insidious, Chapter 2, director James Wan and writer Lee Hwanel decided to dive deeper into the chilling origins of this spectral menace. But what is it about The Bride in Black that left such an unsettling impression? To answer that, we need to go back to Parker Crane's horrifying real-life crimes. Kidnapping women, impact sound effect, mysterious music. For much of his adult life, Parker Crane maintained a low profile. News reports and articles referred to him as an elderly woman, suggesting that he didn't start his killing spree until later in life. But there's something more sinister lurking beneath the surface. Was Parker acting on his own, or was Michelle still influencing him? It's unclear whether Michelle, now elderly herself, was actively manipulating Parker during his murders, or if she had already died and continued her abuse from beyond the grave. In Insidious, spirits seem to retain the appearance they had at death, and Michelle appears to be in her mid-30s, suggesting she might have died when Parker was still young. However, given the non-linear nature of time in the Further, it's possible she existed in multiple forms, much like how Josh encountered a younger version of himself. Regardless of whether Michelle was living or a spectral tormentor, Parker's crimes became a horrifying extension of her twisted desires. Dressed in a tattered black wedding gown and veil, he concealed himself under layers of makeup, presenting the illusion of an old woman. But this disguise wasn't just for evading suspicion. It was a grim echo of Michelle's lifelong obsession with making Parker into the daughter she never had. His victims? Always women. A cruel reflection of Michelle's deranged fixation. Once captured, Parker restrained them in his home, hidden behind a secret passage concealed by a bookcase. From there, he would select from a collection of deadly tools, carrying out each murder with meticulous cruelty. Official reports claimed he had taken the lives of at least 15 victims, but given his method, kidnapping before killing, it's possible the true number was far higher. Some of Parker's known crimes took place around Newark, California, only 65 miles from his birthplace of Hollister. However, he still resided in his childhood home in Los Angeles, a place where Michelle's presence loomed over him like a specter. He even kept newspaper clippings of his failed attempts, including one woman who managed to escape and later described her attacker to police. His disguise may have been his greatest weapon. No one would ever suspect an elderly woman to be a brutal serial killer, and that deception is what allowed Parker Crane to operate in the shadows for so long. Hospitalization and death. Eventually, simply dressing as a woman was no longer enough to satisfy Michelle's twisted expectations. She demanded more, and Parker, ever the obedient son, complied in the most horrifying way possible by attempting to castrate himself. This self-inflicted act of mutilation landed him in the hospital, a desperate moment that should have been a turning point. But for Parker, there was no escape. Whether Michelle was alive or haunting him from beyond, her voice remained the only one he obeyed. The scars she left, both physical and psychological, ensured that his descent into madness was irreversible, and in the end, even death couldn't free him from her control. Parker Crane was admitted to Our Lady of the Angels Hospital on September 20th, 1986, at exactly 3:05 a.m. Upon evaluation, doctors diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia and severe self-mutilation, a direct result of the psychological torment he endured throughout his life. As the days passed in confinement, Parker's mind remained in a fragile state, haunted by the relentless voice of his mother. But it was an unexpected encounter that ultimately shattered the last remnants of his restraint. One day, while being attended to by hospital staff, Parker's eyes locked onto a young boy who had wandered into his room, Josh Lambert, the son of one of the nurses. Something inside him snapped. Overcome with jealousy, Parker saw in Josh everything he had been robbed of: innocence, youth, a normal childhood. Fueled by rage, he attacked Josh in a violent outburst, desperate to reclaim something that had long been lost to him. This incident marked the beginning of his final descent into madness. Just 2 days later, Parker ended his own life. Whether it was an act of desperation or a final, twisted effort to reunite with his mother, he plunged to his death, his soul likely crossing over into the further, where Michelle was waiting for him. His house, a grotesque monument to his crimes, remained abandoned, and the bodies of his victims would not be discovered for years. Yet death did not end his story. The very next day, Parker's presence was felt once more. In an eerie encounter, he stepped into an elevator with Lorraine Lambert, Josh's mother. Unaware of the horror standing beside her, Lorraine apologized to him, speaking to a ghost without realizing it. But Parker wasn't seeking an apology, he was following her. His torment had only just begun, haunting Josh Lambert. Josh Lambert was only a child when the nightmares began. Terrifying visions plagued his nights, leaving him drenched in fear. He spoke of an old woman who would come to visit him while he slept, a shadowy presence lurking just beyond the veil of his dreams. Lorraine, at first, dismissed his claims as the vivid imagination of a frightened boy. But then, the photographs began to change. At first, it seemed like nothing more than a strange camera malfunction, a blurry distortion, an odd shadow. But as the pictures accumulated, a sinister pattern emerged. With every photograph, the figure crept closer. A dark, bride-like entity loomed in the background, its presence undeniable. And then, in one final, chilling image, the figure was no longer just standing there. It was reaching for Josh. The reason behind Parker's obsession with Josh was simple. Josh was what's known as a traveler, someone with the rare ability to astral project. When Josh unknowingly left his body during sleep, he left himself vulnerable, an open vessel, unguarded. But for a spirit to take control of a living person, it required time. Time to sync with the new vessel. Time to take over completely. For Parker, this was his way back. The further was a cold, empty place, a prison of darkness where he was nothing more than a wandering shade. Life, in contrast, was warmth, sensation, existence. He craved it more than anything, and possessing Josh's body would give him the second chance he had always wanted, to live out a childhood he never had. But Josh wasn't just any child. He had a mother who was paying attention. Lorraine, growing increasingly disturbed by the ghostly figure in the photographs, sought out the help of psychic medium Elise Rainier. If anyone could uncover the truth, it was her. But Parker wasn't about to let Elise ruin his plan. As Elise and Josh delved into his dreams, following the trail of the entity that had been haunting him, they finally came face to face with the bride in black. And Parker did not take kindly to the intrusion. In a violent fit of rage, he lashed out, leaving Elise with a deep, jagged slash across her arm. "Elise, I saw it. It would hunt him, and it's not a friend. It's a parasite." Elise knew what had to be done. She placed Josh under hypnosis, suppressing his memories and blocking his ability to astral project. Without that gateway, Parker could no longer reach him. For years, it seemed to work. But Parker wasn't the kind of spirit to let go of unfinished business. The woman who had stolen his best chance at life had made herself a target, and now, all of his attention was focused on revenge. The bride in black had set his sights on Elise Rainier. But there was a problem. Unlike Josh Lambert, Elise was no ordinary target. She possessed an understanding of the further that few could even begin to comprehend. Though she had the ability to astral project, she rarely used it. She knew the dangers of stepping too far into the unknown. But patience was something Parker Crane had learned all too well. He lurked in the shadows for 20 years, waiting for his moment to strike. That moment came in 2006, when tragedy struck Elise's life. Her husband, Jack, was found dead, the official ruling being suicide. Elise, heartbroken, admitted that Jack had struggled with depression, but she never believed he would take such a drastic step. However, was it really suicide? Or was Parker responsible, orchestrating Jack's death as a way to lure Elise into the further? The truth remains uncertain. What we do know is that Elise took the bait. Elise, so I tried to contact him. I just couldn't help it. Elise, I visited the dark looking for him. Elise, something I'd never done before. Something we living people are not supposed to do. Elise, but someone followed me back. A woman. Elise, an entity driven by evil. But this was no woman at all. It was Parker Crane. Elise, ever since then, whenever I used my ability, this woman, I could hear her in my head, screaming over and over that she was going to kill me. Elise, I think, no, I know. If I continue with this work, she's going to kill me. With this terrifying revelation, Elise retired. She abandoned her work, knowing that if she continued, Parker would eventually find a way to claim her life. But like all great warriors, Elise couldn't stay away from the fight for long. The bride in black strikes again. In 2007, a young woman named Quinn Brenner knocked on Elise's door, pleading for help. She was desperate to contact her deceased mother, but instead, she had attracted the attention of a far darker entity, the man who can't breathe. Reluctantly, Elise agreed to investigate, but stepping into the further put her directly in Parker's grasp. Mysterious music. Suddenly, Parker struck. The bride in black lunged from the shadows, pinning Elise to an armchair, his hands tightening around her throat. In the real world, Elise's body convulsed. She was suffocating. The walls of reality and the further blurred as Parker tried to choke the life out of her. At the last moment, Elise broke free, barely escaping the illusory realm. When she returned to her body, she was shaken beyond belief. Elise, that's her, she whispered. Elise, one day, eventually, I'm going to die by her hand. And I believe her. Parker wasn't wrong. Elise's time in the sun was limited, but she wasn't ready to go down just yet. With encouragement from her colleagues, Elise re-entered the further to rescue Quinn, who had been possessed by the demon. This time, the bride in black was waiting for her. As Elise moved through the darkness, she saw a familiar face, her late husband. But before she could react, Parker sprang from the shadows, slamming her against the wall. For the first time, he spoke. Bride in black, this is how you die. Elise, not today. With sheer force of will, Elise threw Parker back into the abyss, using every ounce of strength she had left. The two squared off, but when Elise stood her ground, Parker hesitated. He slinked back into the darkness, retreating for now. This wouldn't be their last encounter. Years later, in 2010, Elise's sightings book would contain yet another entry about the bride in black, suggesting that she had faced him again. The war wasn't over. Possessing Josh Lambert, 2010 marked the final confrontation between Elise and Parker. But this time, the battlefield wasn't Elise's mind. It was Josh Lambert's body. By now, Elise had learned to limit her use of astral projection, making it nearly impossible for Parker to harm her directly. But fate had a way of bringing them both back to where it all started. Josh Lambert, the boy Parker had tried to possess in 1986, was now an adult with a son of his own. And that son, Dalton Lambert, had been lured into the further. You might wonder, why didn't Parker go after Dalton instead? Possessing Dalton would have given Parker the childhood he never had. But there was a reason he didn't make his move. there was something else lurking in the dark. A far more powerful force had already set its sights on Dalton, the red-faced demon. Parker knew better than to challenge an entity of that magnitude. Instead, he set his focus back on Josh, his original target. Now, the perfect storm was brewing. Josh's suppressed memories were unraveling. His son was lost in the further, and Elise was about to walk right into the final battle. The bride in black's ultimate possession was about to begin. Parker has no chance of beating Josh Lambert. Instead, he waits patiently in the further, knowing it's only a matter of time before he takes control. Meanwhile, Josh regains his childhood memories and ventures into the further to rescue his son, Dalton. He succeeds in retrieving him but becomes fatigued after astral projecting for so long, especially after 24 years without practice. As Dalton heads back to his body, Josh rests for a moment. In the further, a strange tension unfolds. To Josh, it's a window, but to Parker, it's a bathroom. Parker holds up a candle to grab Josh's attention, just as he did years ago. Josh confronts him, demanding that Parker stay away from his family. But Parker's actions are only a distraction, allowing the evil spirit to return to Josh's body, trapping Josh's spirit in the further. As the illusion of the bride in black fades into the shadows, Parker takes control of Josh's vessel in the real world. Now back in the land of the living, Parker tries to pass off as Josh, blending in with the family. But Elise, who can see through the deception, snaps a photo of him. When she confronts Parker, he loses it. He chokeslams her into an armchair, mirroring what happened years ago in the further. But this time, Elise can't rely on the supernatural to save her. She's an older woman, and Parker is a strong, younger man. This time, she doesn't survive. Renai, Josh's wife, eventually sees the picture of the bride and realizes something's wrong. But without any concrete evidence, she can't fully convince herself that Josh is responsible for Elise's death. Parker's actions are mysterious, but he refrains from harming Renai, knowing it would jeopardize his new life. He lets her live, playing the part of a normal husband, while the family moves to a new house, away from the police investigation. Life in their new home becomes unsettling. Renai begins to notice strange paranormal activity, but Parker brushes it off, telling her the evil that haunted him is now gone. However, deep inside, Parker still struggles with the haunting presence of his mother's ghost, which continues to torment him and the Lambert family. Still, he insists to Renai that there's nothing wrong. The ghosts they're seeing aren't real. They should ignore them. But Dalton, sensing something's off, begins to suspect his father isn't himself. The situation escalates when Renai finds herself on the floor, unconscious. Parker, meanwhile, is beginning to feel the strain of being in Josh's body. His human vessel is decaying, and Michelle, his mother, reveals that the only way for him to stop rotting away is to kill Renai. But Parker's reluctance grows. He doesn't want to kill her, even if Michelle encourages him to. When Renai confronts Parker/Josh, he claims the spirits aren't real, but she remains paranoid, especially when she hears a piano playing downstairs. Renai, unafraid, investigates, suspecting it's the real Josh trying to reach out from the further. However, Parker doesn't recognize the tune as the song Renai once wrote for Josh, an eerie sign that something is deeply wrong. As the tension rises, Renai tries to reason with him, but he tells her to ignore the spirits. That night, Dalton overhears Parker's unsettling conversation with Michelle. He's now certain his dad is not who he says he is. But before he can warn anyone, Parker goes on the offensive. He ambushes Renai and Lorraine when they return home, trying to kill them both. When Carl, an old friend of Elise's, shows up. He confronts Parker, realizing who he really is. The fight that ensues ends with Carl knocked out, but before Parker can finish the job, Michelle once again encourages him to take more lives, especially female ones. The confrontation with Lorraine and Renee intensifies. Parker/Josh's physical deterioration continues, and as Michelle's influence grows stronger, Parker becomes more erratic. The family retreats to the basement for safety, but Parker doesn't stop his pursuit. While this battle is taking place in the real world, the real Josh, with the help of Elise and Carl, fights back in the further. Elise knows that the key to stopping Parker lies within his own memories, particularly the memory of his abusive mother. If they can destroy it, they can free Josh from Parker's grasp. They locate the house from Parker's past, where Elise tries to access his memories, but Michelle, appearing as a powerful figure, tries to stop them. It becomes a race against time, as Josh in the further desperately attempts to overcome Michelle's hold. In the final moments, Elise manages to destroy Michelle's influence, freeing Josh from Parker's control. The concept of childhood trauma and its lasting effects is brought to light. Parker's mother's abuse shaped his twisted path and manifested in the form of the bride in black, haunting him even in the afterlife. Ultimately, by erasing the damaging memories of his mother, Parker is freed from his own torment and moves on to whatever lies beyond the further. This devastating arc is a powerful exploration of how childhood trauma can affect a person long after they've passed. For Parker, his tragic journey from a victim of abuse to a sadistic killer serves as a haunting reminder of the deep, unresolved pain that lives on. If you want to dive deeper into the twisted world of Insidious and the further, check out our analysis of the red-faced demon. Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell for all future horror content. Who knows what lies ahead?